player races and NPCs. Essentially, I made up kind of a new race. I don't know if it's new or not, but it's a combination of a goblin and an orc. For no better reason, I call them Gorcs because basically it's a combination of both. Pretty short and simple. I didn't want anything too elaborate. Really, there isn't a whole lot to this other than the fact that it's a custom race. And sometimes you'll want to build these into player races depending on your campaign. So a lot of this is homebrew. And the other caveat here is that with the new rule set changes that are coming up this fall, this process may differ. However, if you're going to use and continue to use the regular 5e rule set and still be valid. I was told, or I heard from the grapevine, that essentially older content should work with newer content, but newer content won't work with old. Something like that. And it's all kind of based around player characters. Campaigns like modules and stuff shouldn't be too far off the mark. But when it comes to players, that's where the main differences are going to be. So we'll see what happens this fall. But until then, I'm going to test out this player race. And what I've done is use the import tool in Fantasy Grounds to create the race. It made it so much quicker and easier. So a little bit of background. I was playing around with some generative AI tools. In this case, ChatGPT. Surprise, surprise. And basically what I did is I had formatted it in such a way that the text should kind of coincide with what you would find in an official book. So that's really the base core of this whole thing, is that the text aligns and matches up with the actual text from D&D Beyond or the SRD, whatever you have access to. So it's an important aspect of importing text into Fantasy Grounds, because if it's not correct, the text is not going to parse correctly. So I'll show you the text in question here. So this is kind of the premise here of what I'm getting into as far as creating the races and such. So when you are going to create a race in Fantasy Grounds, there are tools that let you import certain elements of this process to make it a little quicker. The problem with it is quite often is when you get the text, it's not in the correct format. So if you copy and paste from a website or from a PDF, or if you type it in, it has to be the exact wording, or it's not going to parse automatically into the import tool, and it likely won't work on the character sheet either. So that's a lot to do with the formatting of the text, and that takes a while to get kind of used to how that should look and what the little telltale signs if the stuff is actually set up right or not. And you'll get frustrated at first until you kind of get the hang of it, and then eventually it'll be second nature to you. But most people just play with the races that are already given, and they don't really make anything. So this, if you're one of those that don't really care about all this, that's fine. But when you want to create your own content and homebrew stuff, that's where a lot of this would come into play. So I want to, I'm going to ask it to rewrite the D&D Beyond PC text for the Fantasy Grounds platform. I've already done it, but I want to show you how it came out, the text. And I gave it an example of a text block, and I also pointed it to the Atlassian guide because there is some valid information on this. Like I said, this may be better off for, developers or people that are converting product. But, if you want to make a lot of homebrew stuff, this will be invaluable for that. So I'm going to go ahead and, I'll say rewrite the D&D Beyond style Gorc player PC player character race in the text for the Fantasy Grounds platform, and I'll say review our previous conversations. So I'm asking the GPT to go back and reiterate basically. So this is the main part right here. So if you want to import text and it's in the proper format, it's so much easier. So this is the actual wording here. So this from down here to right here, because it doesn't use subraces. There's no subraces, so we don't have to worry about that. But I would copy this text, and it is in an exact format as you would see in the Player's Handbook or one of the other D&D books. That's the key, because without that, Fantasy Grounds is not going to know what the text is. It won't parse it very well. So this is kind of one of those things where you start learning the limitations, the exceptions, and all the different little nuances of using the platform. So I already kind of have it done here in this section here. But once I have all that, I would paste it in here. And just mind you that this formatting wasn't there. It was all plain text at one time. I just went back after the fact and updated all this so that it would look nicer. But when you actually put this in correctly, it parses all the traits automatically. So you don't have to do it by hand, or you don't have to copy another one and edit it. You can actually just copy and paste it. Now, if you're making a subrace for an elf, then by all means use the subrace tab. So when you're creating your own races, so if I open up races, there's a subrace tab that you can just do the subrace parts and then base it off of one of the existing races. But this is actually a whole new race, even though it's a combination of two different Gorcs or orcs and goblins. But even though it's a combo, it is something that is a completely unique race. So I had to build it basically everything. But if you're just going to make a dwarf, elf, halfling subrace, you can build just that part of it and have it harness the base of whatever rule set you're using. So I just have the SRD loaded. So in my modules area, I don't have a ton of things loaded. I have like the maps for testing stuff out. I have the SRD and the bestiary. That's it. So you don't need 50,000 books to do this. If you need like the Player's Handbook for a reference, or if like maybe some of the bases, that might be a thing. But in regards to doing this in Fantasy Grounds, if you have a standard license, you have the SRD, and you have time, you can actually enter a lot of this yourself. The tough part is rule books. Those take a long time to do yourself, but like adventures and accessories, those usually aren't too bad. It's the rule books, they can get kind of monotonous and they're very tricky and sometimes on the wording. So you kind of have to get used to that type of dedication and discipline to build that kind of thing. But this is just going to be for this custom race called Gorcs, and they're just basically a goblin-orc. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to test the race live here, and if it blows up in my face, so be it. But I also made some NPCs, and the reason I did this is quite often when I've made custom content, I either have the NPCs or I have the player character stuff, but I don't have both. So I think sometimes it's nice to have both options. So if you want to build a highly detailed NPC, you could build it as a PC and use all the attributes and the fanciness. If you just need grunts and basic stat blocks, then you can use them as an NPC. So I think that having both on both sides, the player facing and the campaign or DM side, really makes this a lot more useful than just having one or the other. And you may not ever use one or the other, but it's nice to have both of them. So I made the Gorcs, and I made a Gorc Shaman. And then they kind of have a demigod. This is Zarnok the Mad. He's an Ogre Magi, and he basically created the race with an experiment kind of gone mad. So he's the one that created that race. It's kind of a magically created thing. And then he kind of went crazy, and he's basically lost, but he could be alive. They don't know, but they kind of worship him in a way. I mean, they recognize the other goblinoid gods, but their mainstay for the Gorcs is the founder or the creator, Zarnok the Mad. So he basically kind of started doing some experiments and kind of went crazy. And so that's why they call him Zarnok the Mad. But he used to be a very formidable and respected member of this arcane conclave. So he did all this groundbreaking research into transmutation and hybridization and things like that. He was an Ogre Magi, which wasn't very common in that order for conclave, but he was respected, and he's kind of a big dude. He's someone you don't want to mess with. But anyways, his experiments created the Gorc race. So that's kind of how I justified having that special race. So I got a whole backstory, an adventure, everything. So the adventure would help you showcase, like if you do a one shot and you want to test out the work that you've done, run like 2 or 3 sessions with some people playing Gorcs, and then have the adventure unfold and teach them about the background and the superstitions and the beliefs of the Gorcs. So that gives you that immersion, right? You can use this as like a session 0 and maybe do a couple session 0s until you guys get used to playing, and then also testing your content. So it kind of kills one bird with 2 stones, I guess, or it kills 2 birds with 1 stone, however you want to look at it. But essentially, this is just a way to kind of showcase and to test your content. So let's get to the character building. So these traits are already set up. This is the front page that the players will see when they go to build this character. Now, the other caveat is it may not work with the current version of Fantasy Grounds and the character wizard. So I'm going to use the drag and drop method because I know that'll work. Sometimes the wizard is looking for certain specific keywords and books, and it's looking for the actual store-bought, purchased, official content. So sometimes if you have custom stuff like this, it may not pick that up or it may not recognize it. So that's why I'm going to do it this way. Now, if it worked in the character creation process for the character wizard, then I'd do it that way. But in this case, I'll skip the character wizard, and I'm just going to go to add item. And if you've used Fantasy Grounds for a while, there is an order to 5e character creation. It's ability scores, background, race, and class. So a battle-ready character. If you remember that, that's the specific order you want to drag stuff over, if you can remember that. So I'm going to give them some base stats, kind of based off of the, point buy system. So they're pretty strong, fairly dexterous, and have constitution, and then a little bit of wisdom. But then I'm going to actually bump down like the charisma a little bit. I'll leave intelligence at 10. That's pretty average. And so that's not too cheat here. That's not like too much cheating here. I think that's close to the 27 point buy system or whatever it is. So that's kind of the base. So whatever you start with, that's basically you hand enter those when you do the drag and drop. The next step is background. I haven't developed any specific backgrounds for this particular race, so I'm going to use one of the basic ones. So if I go to backgrounds, I'm just going to use the acolyte here, and then that will be my background for this particular character. So there would be more if I had more sources lined up here from the official books, but in this case, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, and I'm actually going to make a shaman because they're a little bit more complex. So that's the second step, is background. So the next step is the race. So this is what I really want to check out. So if you go to the races banner in the character creation section and you drag and drop the Gorc in there, it should automatically add stuff. So it added dark vision. I don't know if it actually updated these or not. I know you're supposed to get +1 on these. I think it did. So these have been updated. And then I think I was going to make this is a 14. This strength is a 14, and the dex was 15. So that's the final number. And then they have a specific armor that they've made for themselves. They usually wear leather, studded leather, padded hide, but they have this brigadine-like armor that's made specifically for Gorcs. It gives you an AC base of 14, and it doesn't give you a penalty on stealth checks and stuff, but if any other race wears it, it may not fit properly, so you don't gain the benefit. It's only an AC 13, and you have disadvantage. So it's a specific item for a specific race of people that they build it for themselves. So it did do the ability score updates, and it did pull over dark vision, which is good. That's what I wanted. In the speed. So it did all that. Let's take a look at the skills. Now, it's not going to give us any skills. I didn't specify anything, but I could have added something like survival, maybe. It's probably their main. If they had a racial skill, it would probably be this. And then they have the Gorc craftsmanship, so that may be another proficiency. So that would more or less be like a proficiency in like crafting and that sort of thing. So that could be something that you would manually add as you build. And then when you go to abilities, this is where you start to see what you have and what was brought over. So he gets goblin, common, orc, and 2 of your choice. So I don't know what I would pick right here, but I'm going to go with giant. And probably, I'd say dwarf, probably, dwarvish. Pretty well rounded in languages, and being that he's an acolyte, he makes sense that he would have more access to that type of thing. Because normally they get goblin, common, and orc, so that was added from the background. Proficiencies. So if I wanted to start with proficiencies, I'd probably take like this Gorc craftsmanship. So that's already in there. That came over fine. Here's the aggressive trait. So as a bonus action, you can move up to your speed toward a hostile creature that you can see. And then they also have the goblin nimble escape. So they're pretty, a little bit tougher than both races. So balance-wise is another thing you have to think about. I don't think it's too unbalanced. And to be honest with you, I could pull back the numbers and, do whatever I needed to do to balance it out. But in this case, for the character build, it doesn't seem too outlandish or too over the top, so I'm not too worried about the balance in this case. So for inventory, I didn't build the assets or the items, but there's a Gorc poison, and then there is the Brigadine armor. So those 2 things I'd probably craft, and then if the player decides to play one of these, they would start with at least the armor, and maybe if they played a shaman, they would start with the poison. But nonetheless, this is just something I don't need to worry about. Here's the notes. It did pull over the size, which is important for the map and for the scaling and the combat tracker for reach. So it did pull that over, which is good. So I'm kind of going down this list to see what it's added and what's not added. And there we go. So here's the race actions and effects. So it pulled those over automatically. I didn't have to do that. So if there is something that Fantasy Grounds can automate, it's going to start doing that more and more as they develop the platform. So eventually, the stuff is just going to work, and that'll be a nice reprieve. So you won't have to do a ton of the script where you have the effects automation. I think eventually that's going to be built into it. Then a lot of this is more role play. So he's got aggressive, and then he's got nimble escape. So these don't really do anything other than perhaps give you some options. So in the description here, I'm just going to put a little B in parentheses. And that'll remind me that those are bonus actions. And now I'm going to do the class. So in this case, I'm going to do a cleric. And that's all I have loaded right now anyways. So the SRD covers a cleric pretty well. So that's why I'm going to use that. I could do a druid because this is more like a shaman. Maybe I'll do that instead of a cleric. Yeah, I'll do like a druid instead. Actually I do cleric. I don't want to mess with all the other druid stuff. So you can drag and drop this in, and then you want to pick your skills. So one thing you got to be careful with manual building is once you drag something over, you're kind of committed to it. And then also, if you already have skills, you want to make sure you know which ones you already have so you don't double up. So we're going to do history and medicine. So those will be helpful for the shaman type build. And then I'll go ahead and confirm it. And that adds that. And then there was that craftsmanship thing, so I can manually add that. So I'll say Gorc craftsmanship. And what we'll do is we'll base it off of wisdom, and they're proficient with it. So that's when they build their own like stuff that goes with their culture. So that's what that applies to. So they all are trained on how to make that armor and the poisons. They're at least they're aware of its uses and strengths and weaknesses and that kind of thing. So I put that on there. All right, so that's the majority of it. That's the build. I didn't pick any spells. I don't think that's necessary for this demonstration, but I did want to make sure that the racial traits came over, and they did. And then any of the changes like the ability score adjustments, which they did do, and then also the dark vision and the speed. So that's pretty good. I like it. So also you can go back in the chat window if you have access to it, and we can see that it added these different things. So ability score +1 applied. So it did that. But I don't know if it did the other two because it has a statement in here. It says your dex score increases by 1 and your con and strength increase by 1. I don't know if it did that or not. So I'm going to try it one more time just to see, because I might have to reword this part because this doesn't look like it did it right. So if I go to characters, and I'm just going to build another blank, now I'll be able to tell if it actually worked. So I'll take this race thing here and drag and drop it onto the sheet. Yeah, it only did the dex bonus, so I have to fix the wording on that actual feature. So I want to look at some others. I don't know if it'll do the 1, 2, and 3. You might have to just say, one or the other and not all three. I think that's something that was changed with Tasha's. So I think you'll have to put that in there. And I believe I read on the forums that was an issue with that sort of phrasing. So instead of having +1, +1, and +1, I'm just going to have 2. Let me see if I can fix that wording a little bit. So your strength increases by 2. Wait, it says your constitution and your strength score. See, that's probably why. So I'm going to back that up, and your constitution score increases by 2. So we'll see if that fixes that problem. So, or it's really not a problem. It's basically going beyond the functionality of the platform in this case. I know they had to do something fancy with when they introduced Tasha's, because you get +1 and 3 different ability scores. So let's see if that helps. So if I go to characters and create another one, and then that only changed the wording for the front. You also have to change it for the trait. So when I go to other, under ability scores, I need to fix this. That's the one you got to change. So let's see what happens here. So if I drag and drop this over, what does it do? Yeah, it worked. So it's just a little minor tweak there. So I don't think it can handle this 3 different increases. It's just one or the other, or you can choose +1 for 3 different ability scores or something like that. But that was a very minor thing, but it does mess with the character creation. So that's why you test it like this when you go. So I think that's all I wanted to show you is basically you can import a race and you use the monsters of the multiverse format. So if you have D&D Beyond or an official source, you can copy and paste the outline or the wording and then just substitute out the words that you need or the changes that you need to make, and then add anything if you need to. But just keep in mind that how this is formatted, how the wording is, and that you do have to go in and adjust the other parts of it. So this thing here is bogus. So I'd have to fix that in this import window. So this is where it kind of went wrong. So ability score increase, period. And then take this stuff, make this regular text. And now when you go to import this, it should do it right the first time, because I didn't realize that it did 3 instead of just 2. So you get a dex of +1 and you get a con of +2. I had it set up as +1 to strength as well, and then +1 on con and +1 on dex. It doesn't handle that very well. Oops. So formatted, yep. So I did a boo-boo here. Somewhere I got it wrong. What is going on here? Oh, it could be because I already have it. Oh, see, this is where it. Okay, it's formatting issue. I mean, it tried, but there's some kind of extra spacing in here that it's not liking. So it could be that because I edited it the way I did, there's a carriage return in here. So that's problematic sometimes when you have that issue. So you got to be careful when you change this verbiage here. Ability score increase. Let me look at the other one. So races, and let's go to this. It could also be that I have 2 of these. So let me see if. Okay. Yeah. So this is the formatting that it needs to be. There we go. And it could also be that I've gone back and changed this stuff. So it may not recognize the formatting. So you want to keep all this stuff here. Oops. You want to keep all this stuff as plain text. That way, when it goes to parse it, it doesn't throw it off. Because I think that's what happened is I went in after the fact and changed this stuff. And look, I noticed there was this extra space after dark vision. Yeah, that's the little things like that. Here's where it's kind of messed up. So yeah, you get all this weird punctuation and extra spaces and stuff that can throw off the parsing. All right, so let's see what it does now. So Gorc, ability score, and see this is italicized. It probably just needs to be plain text. So this is something you got to massage this data if you're going to import. So we'll go ahead and import. Let's see what that does. Yeah, it kind of worked, but see, it's all goofed up because of the formatting. So that's what the big issue is if this formatting isn't correct, it's going to break this. And it's still taking in the fact that I had bold in here. So it doesn't like that. So somewhere in here in this text, there's a bold character that it. There we go. Let's see if that helps. So I'm just deleting. And it could be the fact I got 2 of them too. Let me try that. Yeah, see that it helped. Whatever I did helped because it now parsed in the majority of that stuff. So it did it right. But it all has to do with what's in your clipboard and the type of formatting that you have. So you got to be careful with that. So somewhere in here in this text, there's likely an extra character or some kind of hidden space or something. And that's all it takes to throw this off. So if you want to look for that kind of stuff, you get a bona fide text